speaker, Julian Tollest. He is Head of Master Planning and Design at Quintain. He's updating us from last year's Urban Tree Festival, and he'll be taking us on a walkabout at Wembley Park, and I'm hoping updating us on the Avenue of Champion Trees of the World on Olympic Way. Julian, over to you.
Simon, thank you very much, and welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us. Maybe some of you were with us last year, so I am going to sort of pick up a little bit of where we left off. But if you weren't with us last year, don't worry. You'll get the overview from everything within this presentation as well. And I'm hoping, I recognise some names on the attendees list. I'm hoping that we've got a mixture of people who live and work at Wembley, as well as some people maybe who've never been to Wembley at all. So if you need to know anything more about me or Wembley or Quintain, you can basically Google Wembley Park, Quintain Living or Quintain, and you'll also find me, if you need me, on LinkedIn and social media as well. I'm an architect by background, but I've worked at Quintain for the last 16 years as the Head of Master Planning and Design. So last year's tour, we did a bit of a sort of a walk around the site. It was a virtual one, again, moved online at short notice. And we started at Wembley Park Tube Station. We went down and around the stadium, and we ended up back at number 9 on the map, at the location of where at the time was the old pedway from the 1970s, and where now there's something quite different. And we talked a little bit about this Avenue of Champion Trees of the World. So in overall terms at Wembley so far, we've planted 985 trees. And in last year's tour, we covered 29 different species. I'm going to focus on the 7 most recent ones today, and particularly on the Olympic Way piece itself. So on Olympic Way, the basic concept we've been working on for, well, most recently the last 5 years, but personally for the last 16 years, is this tree-lined avenue which takes you from Wembley Park Tube Station down to Wembley Stadium. And it's Wembley Way, as some fans know it, but its formal name is Olympic Way, named after the 1948 Olympics, which were held at Wembley. And the concept in landscape terms, designed by Grossmax Landscape Architects with Dixon Jones, was also advised by Tony Kirkham at Kew Gardens, which I'm sure many of you will have heard of. And it's based around 24 varieties of trees in matched pairs. And they are selected from the sort of the temperate region of the Northern Hemisphere. So in simple terms, if you rolled out Olympic Way like a map on the ground, the trees up by Wembley Park Tube Station would be from West Coast America. The trees halfway down are quintessential British trees. So you'll see the London plane there, for example. And the trees at the end of the journey are from East Coast Japan. And then we have a sort of a collection of trees either side of the new steps itself. So this was Olympic Way, February last year, and this was Olympic Way March last year. And, we'd hit lockdown and we'd lost the crowds, but we were still building. And the construction teams at Wembley have done an amazing job in the last year to keep going through all of the various rules and regulations. And we got to the last part of the journey, and we were looking at these last 7 trees. So on plan, this is the last part of the journey. You get to Engineers Way, and this is where we've now built the Olympic steps. And I'm going to run through these trees sort of one by one, and I'll also sort of just pick up on some of the challenges we had in that. So where we were last year, the last one in the journey was a ginkgo, number 18 on the list of 24. It was actually planted in February 2018. And if you walk down Olympic Way, you will see on the tree grill in the ground the Latin name of the tree. And you'll also get the line of longitude with which that speech is quintessentially associated. So this was the ginkgo. And just to orientate you on these slides, these are the photos taken at the tree tagging trip, which in this case was to Von Ehren's nursery in Holland. And I know on the call today, we also have David Hughes, who's our landscape estate technician, or I sometimes call him David the gardener, but David looks after everything at Wembley Park and does this most amazing job looking after it all. And David has been on this journey from start to finish as well. And if I can, I'll give him a chance to sort of do a bit of a shout out at the end. So you see on the side here, the tree species at the time we picked them, and you can see the details of the height, the spread, the girth, and critically how much of a clear stem there is. Because one of the things we have to think about, particularly on Olympic Way, is avoiding low overhanging branches, which either might get hit by vehicles or might actually be a temptation for football fans to climb on a big event day. So this is the first one of the new trees planted in March this year, the common walnut, Juglans regia. The other thing you might remember from last year, I've done a kind of rarity in London rating, and it's based upon Paul Wood's excellent book, which if you haven't seen it, it's not going to work because I'm on, do you all know Paul Wood's book, London Street Trees? If you don't, I'll take the blurred background off my screen and so you can see it, but it is a really superb book and I'd recommend that. So thanks to Paul for the kind of the rarity rating. So this picture was literally taken on Saturday. So it was actually on the day of the Chelsea-Leicester FA Cup final. So you'll start to see a few people in these pictures as well. So Juglans regia is the first tree. Next one is the Japanese foxglove. Again, so we're heading sort of down into the lines of eastern longitude as we walk down this route. And then we have the foxglove tree. The initials here are just simply the reference we use for it, which is taken from the Latin name, but also the number. It does sometimes to me look a bit like a shirt number for a footballer. I'm sure Paulonia was the best centre forward that West Ham never had. But anyway, that's what's going on with these numbers. And I've taken a picture actually of the matched pair on the other side because it's literally just coming into flower around about this time of the year. And again, these are all pretty rare in the ratings of the London Street Tree book. Now, we then hit a problem was that the tree we were going to plant at this particular location, the Tree of Heaven, ended up on a quarantine list to do with biosecurity. And the article on the side here was actually an article from The Guardian, which explains some of the challenges that are going on. So although we had actually tagged these trees at Lorberg's nursery some time back, we couldn't import these trees into the United Kingdom. So we did a quick switch and we switched it to a Katsura, or now I always pronounce this wrong, Cercidiphyllum japonicum. And that is what has been planted, but it's actually a slightly smaller size of tree because of course we had to sort of quickly run around the nurseries at the last minute finding a sort of a stand-in. So we didn't have the benefit of this having been a tree that we'd tagged earlier and put into place. So this is the actual tree planted now at Wembley, and I've just popped in an illustration of the autumn foliage on that. So again, one of the really nice things about this concept is that at any one time of the year, you could see all different varieties, colours, fruits, etc., on the trees down Olympic Way. So it really is a sort of a coming together of representatives of the world, for want of a better word. Penultimate tree, a giant dogwood. Now, according to Paul's book, I couldn't find any examples of that in London. I think it's just that there wasn't a particular tagged example. So people on the call may know of some examples in London. And then the final tree in the run, the Japanese Zelkova, again, another rare tree, Zelkova serrata. So that is the last tree which you come across as you walk down Olympic Way. So a year ago when we met, that is how it looked. And the ginkgo was the last tree on the left here. We've been quite busy. We've removed the pedway, we've built the Olympic steps, and we've installed those last 6 pairs of trees. So this picture taken early last week, we're still finishing off the paving work in Olympic Way, but in readiness for the event at the weekend, we then had to open up Olympic Way, and this was Wembley on Saturday at about, I think it was around about 2 o'clock. What I quite liked about these photos is that we've also noticed that a pigeon tends to perch on this ledge here, and you can actually see we've captured the pigeon in mid-flight, just about to land on the ledge. So this is Wembley going from kind of everyday mode into event day mode. And these were predominantly the Leicester City football fans gathered on Market Square. And then there's different locations for different fans. So you can see that Wembley takes quite a pounding, for want of a better word, on a big event day. But it always looks pristine after the event and before the event. And again, just from a slightly different view, the pedway this time last year, the Olympic Way Zone C, or the last part of it, in March this year. And this lorry here is carrying one of the first trees that was planted. So you can see they arrive, you can get 2 of this scale of tree on a lorry at a time. So they are, substantial specimens. Which have been brought in from the nursery. So we've got 3 different nurseries we've worked with. The main contractor for this piece of work is a company called Volkers, and the landscape subcontractor is a firm called Goddard's. And again, this is that bit just before the FA Cup final, and this is it in the evening. So the lighting and everything is all part of that scheme, which has now been delivered. And then just slightly closer to the stadium, either side of the new steps, there's 7 aside, for want of a better word. There's 7 Carpinus petulus fans fontaines, so quite a fastigiate tree. The ones on this side were planted in September 19, and the ones on the other side were planted just this year. So again, we did look at oaks as an option for a sort of a quintessentially English tree right close to the stadium. But because of processionary oak moth, we switched to Carpinus instead. So a few principles and priorities. Again, we've got lots of things which underpin our thinking here, but we always talk about the public realm, and at the end of the design process, does the design activate all 5 senses? And ultimately, will I be proud of what was actually achieved? And it's underpinned by some other principles which relate to the principles embodied by the London National Park City, for which I am also a trustee. And we may say a few words about that at the end. We might be joined by one of our colleagues, Adrian Hooper, who not only works at the stadium for the FA, but is also a London National Park City Ranger. So the idea of a greener, healthier and wilder city, and one where we connect people to the nature around them, but also to each other. We create more green and blue landscape, and we champion that landscape which has been created, which links through to Quintaine's own principles of people, place, property, and then the familiar triple bottom line of sustainability, the social, environmental, and economic. So if you think of a mental map of Wembley, this is kind of Wembley turned upside down. We have cultural activities, we have shopping activities, we have park life, as we call it. And this is the aerial view of Wembley taken last year, just before we demolished the pedway itself. Now, this scale is sometimes quite deceptive. I mean, Northwest London is actually very green and blue and hilly. And obviously, Wembley Park was created by Watkin in the 1890s with the coming of the railways to allow Londoners to escape the smog of central London and take in the fresh air of Wembley. This is the master plan that we are in the process of delivering. We're about halfway through building the flats, so still some years to go. And in terms of the scale of it, this shows how big it is, maybe compared to some of the other sort of large schemes in London. But if you want an idea of scale, well, inside the stadium is probably one of the most famous hectares of grass in the world, but you can only see it if you have a ticket. And at the weekend, you could only see it if you had a ticket and a negative COVID test. So this was inside the stadium on Saturday afternoon. And you certainly can't walk on the grass inside the stadium. So to give an idea of the scale, the stadium pitch edged in orange, we can fit over four and a half, maybe 5 of those pitches into the new park that we are building at Wembley. And more about that probably next year's talk. I've mentioned that everything in green are the buildings we finished, and everything in yellow are the buildings yet to come. And again, some just statistics about how many people live there, schools, and also the 9 different tenures of housing that we are providing. I mean, this is Wembley in 1996, last time that Wembley hosted the European Football Championships. This is the new stadium superimposed on the old. So you can see how much bigger the new stadium was than the old. And this was the stadium under construction in 2005, and the area in 96, and the area in 2021. There's a wider landscape story as well, which, conscious of time, we'll probably talk about it at a different event, if you like. But also we do right down to the sort of the minutiae of the detail. And what you can see in the picture here is a bug hotel, which was actually built by some of the apprentices who worked for one of our contractors. So Raluca Ursu is actually the technical coordinator at CISC. So she built this as part of their site setup, and we've kept it permanently, and it's now a proud of place in the park. I know this is about trees, but we're also doing water differently. In 2006, we'd have built a big underground attenuation tank and then covered it up with paving in Arena Square. And in 2020s, we're letting all the water much more visible, and it's all part of the sustainable urban drainage system. And Kirk Nelson from LDA Design, who's on this call, we were with him on Saturday, and it is looking fantastic. So it's getting the amenity out of the water as well as the technical performance. You may remember last year I did this trick of here's the CGI, here's the reality. Here's the CGI, and here's the reality. And the contractors' cabins, which you can see in the middle of the park, they will come out in mid-July, and the whole of the rest of that, what's called Union Park South, will be open for everybody to enjoy. You can already go in there. We're just waiting for that last part of the lawns to be finished. And the water itself, not only enjoyed by, in this case, the builders walking past, but also enjoyed by the wildlife as well. The design we're looking at for the northern part of the park is a much more biodiverse and naturalistic design. And again, that's something which will be starting on site. The buildings start on site later this year. And that first phase of Union Park North should be finished in 2024. Now, last year we talked about the technical information, and David keeps all of our trees up to date on the Curio XYZ mapping system. So again, log on to that if you can. We've got a slight glitch with Curio and the digital data sets, which don't even appear, I don't think, on some of the other mapping systems, that the GLA and the Brent data set doesn't seem to be finding its way through. But it's a very useful system for us to record everything that we have been doing. We talked a little bit last year about costs and values, and I think I referred to it's a bit like an iceberg sometimes. A semi-mature tree that we've been looking at might cost anything between £1,300 and £4,100 per tree. Now that includes what's called the air potting and the transport of it. But depending on how you plant that tree, depending on whether you put it just in dirt in the ground or whether you put it in an engineered sort of silver cell system, it can be anything up to 10 times that amount. So as I say, it's a bit like an iceberg, maybe, you know, one ninth of the cost is what you see above ground and 8/9 is below ground. It's probably about a third where we plant them in more natural areas, but it's about a 1:9 ratio where we plant them in the urban areas. And I think at last year's presentation, one of the people that was actually on the call, and I can't see whether they're on the call today or not, actually then picked this up as a study, and they're doing a detailed piece of research about tree planting in urban areas at the University of the West of England. And we talked about specification. Trees are generally specified by their girth, which is the sort of, you know, if you pinch your thumb and first finger, that would be a girth of about 15 centimeters. And everything that you've just been looking at on Olympic Way is all in this semi-mature or extra mature category of tree planting. They are the most mature trees we've planted at Wembley. It's Dean Bell who's doing the study. And Dean, I can see you are on the call, so you might want to chip in with some questions at the end as well. So a tree pit in the lawn was this sort of detail. The tree pits outside Premier Inn were done using this system, and we had some challenges with the way that pit worked. The tree planting in Arena Square was the first trees we planted back in 2006, and the Quercus palustris there have flourished ever since. So they've been doing really well. Sometimes we get into these very complicated arrangements of tree planting in steps around the ponds, which have quite a complicated tree detail underground. So that's probably getting more towards the 1/9 ratio. Again, back to Arena Square. And then on Olympic Way, what you see above ground is this. So this is the tree grating we were talking about around each tree with the name of the tree on it. And underneath it, you have this quite extensive system of attenuation system for dealing with stormwater runoff and a silver cell system to do with the health of the tree as well. And so what we do know is that the way we have planted these trees on Olympic Way, it's almost like a sort of silver cell tree trench, for want of a better word, will ensure the continued health and longevity of the health of these trees without any issues of the trees lifting the paving or interrupting the utilities underground, which are the sorts of problems which have, you know, bereft a number of cities in the UK. And then this is an installation of one of the early trees, but some very, very careful handling of these trees, always lifted by the root ball, never by the trunk itself. The blue strop you see on that picture is simply just to stop the thing spinning in the wind, and then moved in with the telehandler, which you can see on the right-hand side of that picture. We always have to think about care and maintenance, and David prepared some really useful notes, which I'll show on the next slide last year, but Goddards, who planted the trees, have been looking after these trees as well. We don't have an automatic irrigation system on Olympic Way. We, you know, by dosing them manually, we know exactly the amount of water that's gone in there. And then these were some of the notes that David prepared last year, you know, some fantastic detailed notes on maintenance and upkeep of trees at Wembley Park, and some of the challenges we've had and where we've had trees that have died, why have they died, what we've done to replace them, and again, all through those careful notes that David put together. So last sort of part really is about good health and well-being. I love this illustration, which I saw, it came up during lockdown, actually on the back of a context of an article about Strava data. And this is the Strava running routes that people follow in London. So, you know, you can see that Hyde Park and Regent's Park are very popular. But just up here in HA9, you can see the circuit of the stadium and Olympic Way, and you know how that's all become part of the running routes. And we have Ray's Running Club, which used to meet indoors at the Yellow Pavilion and also runs around the Wembley Park estate. If you run around the stadium, it is exactly 1 kilometre. And again, just to give you some idea of the scale, if you took the football pitch from inside the stadium, you could fit it where we have now built the Olympic steps. So by removing the pedway and building the Olympic steps, we've created, well, not only a football pitch's worth of public realm here, but we've also enabled the completion of that last part of Olympic Way. We also have other tree planting. We have rhododendrons. They are in movable containers. I was just chatting with Simon before you all joined on about how, so the rhododendrons look fantastic around about FA Cup final day. The pink parking itself is a bit of a celebration of health and fitness. Hyam on the left posed. Hyam works at the London Designer Outlet. She posed as the famous Dutch athlete Fanny Blankers-Koen. And the Bill on the right, who used to work with us at Quintain, posed as his hero, Anthony Joshua. And then Councillor Ernest, the Mayor of Brent, Amanda, a local resident and a professional photographer, and then finally Toma, who built the pink car park. As we can often say, we can all feel a little bit Freddy some days. I mean, in some ways, landscape is the genius loci of Wembley Park. It is the spirit of the place. You know, you can go back beyond Watkin to Repton and the whole principles of the Red Book and burrowed landscape. But for me, and this is where I kind of stick a different hat on, is, you know, well, why do I support the London National Park City as a trustee? And why did I get involved in it? Well, this is from my patch in South London. This is Brockwell Park. And it's just a classic scene. This is during the Lambeth County Show. It's a London park. It's clearly London in the distance, but it brings the best of both worlds into a beautiful local park. And I sometimes say I'm the architect on the Clapham Omnibus. I mean, I haven't been on the omnibus for over a year now, but it's the test of the common man. And if I went out for a run from where I live, I'd either go to Brockwell Park or Clapham Common. And they have been absolute godsends, particularly during this last year. So connectivity to nature has never been more appreciated than it has been in this last year. And I'm also lucky enough to have an allotment. So you know, this is me on my allotment, doing the best I can. And these particular paving blocks on the right-hand side actually were some of the ones that we lifted from Olympic Way. So I've got a little bit of London, of Wembley heritage down on my little plot in South London. And to kind of link it all back, there is this sort of underlying green and blue infrastructure in London, whether it's the natural of the natural rivers, it could be the natural of the hidden rivers, which again, the whole talk in its own right. But we've also got this sort of engineering and infrastructure which underlies London as well. And I just like the way that had all joined it up. And you know, the geological substrata of London, the London clay, the Lambeth Group, as to use its particular name, is that seam of clay which underlies London. So what are we doing next? We've used these screens at Wembley a lot for messaging, and we're looking at this idea of a Friends of Wembley Park group, so like a sort of civic amenity society, particularly interested in the public realm and the park. We're also looking at a sort of a group of dog owners associated with it, and that might be called the Friends of Wembley Bark. And it's this sort of signage you see on the left. I mean, this is from the Friends of Clapham Common. But also, I think, Helen, I've seen you're on the call as well. And if you haven't seen Helen's beautiful map of London's green spaces, the London Green Ground map, drawn as if it's the sort of the tube network. This was the previous edition, and there is a new edition which has just come out. So I'd really encourage you to get a copy of that online. So just, how does Wembley connect to this wider context of London? Well, these photos taken recently, the North Circular is in the foreground, the Brent River Park running up the River Brent, connecting through to just east of the stadium. Again, a beautiful resource, not necessarily used by many people, and not realised by many people that it's so close to Wembley itself. And on this view, the park in the foreground is King Edward VII's Park, or King Eddie's Park as it's locally known. The park built to replace the Wembley Park that was lost under the footprint of the British Empire exhibition in 1924. So sometimes we say we are putting the park back into Wembley Park as part of our overall philosophy as well. And I just love this image as well, because it shows, you know, the scale of this international icon in the distance, Wembley Stadium, known around the world. But then as you come up onto Barn Hill, you can see this sort of fantastic, classic, semi-detached suburban metro land environment around Wembley itself. So as part of the National Park City movement, we're looking at this idea of trying to improve the wayfinding between existing parks and new parks. And the gentleman in the picture is Daniel Raven Ellison, the founder of the London National Park City. And this was him just suggesting, you know, why don't we have a signage system which helps to find people, to help people to find their way between the different parks of London. And that parks can have all different uses. You know, you can have a park where everything happens. It can be an active park. And we at Wembley Park were very pleased to see ourselves featured in that particular document about the idea of culture in the park. And Josh McNaughton, who's on the call, and Claudio may be able to say a little bit more about that. So I mentioned that we're going for a mild biodiverse approach in the future. This beautiful illustration was done by Bradley Murphy Design, landscape architects, for what they called Wild at Wembley. And it is that sort of complete coming together of the landscape which we are starting to develop, but also celebrating that landscape through street art and murals. And this is a piece that was commissioned through Quintain's support of the launch of the London National Park City from ATM Street Art. And it will be appearing on the station, the wall facing the Chiltern Railway track shortly. So in conclusion, in 1996, last time the Euros were held at Wembley, this is what Wembley looked like. You know, a sea of tarmac, a sea of concrete surrounding the old Wembley Stadium, and an experience which was very much about have your pint of beer at Baker Street, dash up to Wembley and dash out again. And many people can remember the iconic scenes that happened inside the stadium, and the classic picture of Gaza in the top right-hand corner scoring that memorable goal against Scotland. But I'd challenge anybody to remember just how it looked outside the stadium and what an experience that was. This is Wembley today, and this is Wembley as people will see it in the Euros starting next month. A completely different setting, a world-class setting, which not only works for the event day, but critically works for the 365 everydays of the year for residents, visitors, workers, and people just to enjoy Wembley Park. So that's the slides. Maybe a bit more than just about trees, but I just wanted to make sure that everyone had a chance to sort of see maybe some of what they might have missed last year. Now, I can't see any questions in the chat. Adrian, are you on the call? Or you might be on a different name. Simon, I don't know whether you want to, you can take everybody off mute, or if people want to put their hands up, or it's always a bit unnerving this, because this is where I realise I've been talking for the last 30 minutes and nobody's been listening.
Oh no, I think we've been listening, Julian.
Good, okay.
Now, to unmute, really, if you want to unmute, I think you can actually.
Perfect. Great, I can see some questions coming in now. Brilliant. Okay, thank you. So, Peggy, could you please explain where the new park will be in relation to Wembley Park Station? Yes, let me just, I'm going to flick back to a map. Sorry, just a little bit slow. Let me get back to that map and then here we go. This would do us. So Wembley Park Tube Station is at the top of Olympic Way, just off the top of the screen. So as you come down Olympic Way, once you get to Fulton Road, the new park is all off to the east side. And the part that has been built so far is the southern portion of it. So if you remember, I showed you a picture which had some water and some contractors' cabins in it. The cabins are just here, but all the water and landscape is already built. If I just go back a few more slides, there'll be a bit more of a formal launch of the park this summer. We thought we'd best sort of focus on that after the Euros have taken place. Gillian, are there any areas where you've had to deviate negatively from the planting vision? Is the result better or worse? You must be really proud of how gorgeous it all is now. Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, I'm just a part of a really big team, and it's really good that a few of the rest of the team have been able to join us. So one of the lessons, we talk about lessons learned. So one of the things that Kirk Nelson and I particularly picked up on is wasn't so much to do with the tree planting, because I think Kirk's been on this project longer than me, and the trees in Arena Square, the quercus, have flourished beautifully. But where we did learn quite a few lessons was in the shrub planting, particularly the density of shrub planting at the time of planting. So in this particular image here, we sort of bumped up the size and specification of the shrub planting that went in along the park edge, just to give it sort of a big impact from day one. And we also managed to plant these 8 trees here, almost 2 years before the park has opened, just by ensuring that the contractors' cabins were pushed further back into the park to allow us to build that green buffer along the frontage. That's okay. Adrian, I don't know if he's not. So Adrian is, are you on the call, Adrian? Adrian works at the Football Association. So he deals with the transport for the stadium. And, as I say, I just thought it was interesting in terms of his sort of perspective on life. But there's a couple more questions. From Claudio, who is a member of the home team. So thank you, Claudio, for the question. What about other pocket parks in Wembley Park? So we've got this big 7-acre park, which I mentioned. We've also developed over to the other side, when you can see it on this picture just coming up on screen now. So this is from Curio. So just north of the Civic Centre, we built a slightly more formal, more of a sort of a London square, which has got more formal planting in it as well. And then all of the residents' gardens, which are accessible to all residents, again, there's some extensive tree planting in those as well. I would say that when Wembley is finished, a quarter of the land is publicly accessible open space. It's paid for and maintained at private expense, but it's totally publicly accessible. So you shouldn't feel any different walking down Olympic Way than you would walking down the Mall, for example. Another quarter of the sort of the Google satellite view is residents' gardens and residents' rooftop terraces. So looking down on Wembley as a satellite view when it's all finished, 50% of it will be green or blue, which is the benchmark target for the London National Park City campaign. We've also got some interesting things about how we name spaces as well. And we often will refer back to the history of Wembley, or both of the place, but also the people that have been associated with it. There's a path in Union Park called Walter's Walk, which is named after Walter Citrine, who was Baron Citrine of Wembley, but he was the founder of the trade unions movement. And one of the other park or pocket space names which we've managed to name is the space just off the boulevard. It has a zigzag path in it, and it's been named Zigazag Alley, which obviously is a slight reference to a Spice Girls song as well. So I do apologise for any embarrassing dad jokes that we've managed to work into our street names and place names at Wembley Park over the years. So I know the recording is being made, Simon, so I think Urban Tree Festival will probably share these afterwards. So if you've missed anything or wanted to follow up on it, if you have any questions you want to email me and follow up to it, by all means, look me up on the links I said at the start. And I really look forward, hopefully, fingers crossed, we've got 2 more stages of lockdown easing, and the good thing is that there is so much open space now to enjoy at Wembley that hopefully we can maybe see some of you physically back at Wembley Park in the summer if you're not already enjoying it.
Well, thank you so much, Julian. That's tremendous. Please, if there are more questions, keep them coming in through the chat. Julian, keep an eye on them just for a moment or two. I'm so pleased that Julian's already talking about coming back next year. Definitely. It's been a real highlight of the Urban Tree Festivals to see this project develop, and the attention to detail that's going into the tree planting and landscaping. I think it's really wonderful to see and really wonderful to hear about. I love the idea of the Friends of Wembley Bark, incidentally. I'll be along with my Cocker Spaniel. But fantastic.
Jeffrey and Gillian are asking about seats. So we have got some benches along Olympic Way. In the park, I mean, there are both benches and very extensive areas of seating on the sort of the step terraces down to the ponds. And I've also tested it out. The Olympic steps are beautiful to sit on, actually. You kind of need about 2 rises worth, but they are a great place to sit as well. One of the other things as well, which we should have opening this summer, we have a small bandstand which we are building, and it's deliberately designed as a movable bandstand so that we can put it in different locations. It could ultimately have a home in the park, but it will initially have a home just off Olympic Way. So Josh and Claudio organised the Buskin London Festival of Music at Wembley, and I just love this idea that maybe amongst us there's another sort of Ed Sheeran who starts their life sort of busking on the stage at Wembley, and within a few years is performing to 98,000 people inside the stadium itself. And can I also thank you all for coming along and joining it? It's always a bit nervous when you set these things up. Will anybody be interested? But I hope it has been interesting for you all.
It absolutely has been. Thank you very much for coming, Julian,